But I looked at them and they looked at me. And when I got through scanning the crowd, I was just about to drop my weapon and surrender. All of them dropped their weapons and put their hands on their helmet. We went to a campground just a little south of here. No franchise name, nothing fancy about it, but it had 80% of the lots were rented year round by the same people. And the interesting part is they were all veterans, many from World War II, Korea, a few from Vietnam. I think they found a community of like-minded individuals. And so it just slowly became a veterans campground. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was they had a huge kettle in the center of the campground, just right outside there was one individual that would invite us down for these dinners all the time. And the community would make a kettle of stone soup. Yes, the same story we all heard in grade school about a group of people that put a stone in some boiling water to create soup. And then as others came by, they each contributed what they had, what they could spare. Carrots, lettuce, not lettuce, celery, meat, whatever they had. And by the time it was all done, they had a delicious soup. The story teaches us to cooperate with each other, how community can come together and take something as bad as stone soup and turn it into something wonderful. But it gets better. These veterans would sit around, and after dinner was over and a few drinks had been had, they would recount days from the military. Being a U.S. Army veteran myself, I knew what this is about. I have my own stories, and I love listening to the other stories from the other servicemen. I always feel like theirs was much more interesting than mine. But my father-in-law shared a story of how he got his Bronze Star. You see, when he was in the service, he was stationed in Germany during World War II. He was in the Battle of the Bulge, and the men hated the sea rations. Of course, you eat it because that's all there is. But a couple of men in their unit, and I think this was indicative of most units, because when I was in Korea, we had a guy that could take the box lunch, they called it back then, and turn it into a gourmet meal. So we would all cover for him. He would go an hour or so before it was time to eat. He would go take all of our box lunches, put it all together, and come up with something fantastic. He wasn't a cook, he wasn't a chef, although in hindsight, he was one of the best. But the Army, in its infinite wisdom, said that he was infantry. Much like the episode in MASH, I guess. But anyway, my father-in-law and these other veterans would share a story of their stone soup days. And my father-in-law shared a story that he was waiting for the soup to be finished. Everybody from not just his unit, but another unit, they all compiled what they had. And while it was ready, he was walking the perimeter in a German town, to make sure that it was clear. It was not uncommon for it to be clear one minute and the next minute it wasn't. Well, as his story goes, and I have no doubt, no reason to disbelieve him. He said, I came up to a T in the road, and you couldn't hear anything. The town was dead silent. And he said, I just went up to the corner and made a left, turned left. And when I did, there were 8 German soldiers scattered about 20 feet apart. No, in about 20 feet, they were scattered 4 or 5 feet apart. And he said, I looked at them, and they looked at me. And when I got through scanning the crowd, I was just about to drop my weapon and surrender because I'm outnumbered, really outnumbered. And he said, just a second before I did, all of them dropped their weapons and put their hands on their helmet. He said, in hindsight, I now know they wanted to be taken captive because they knew they would be fed, they would be housed, they wouldn't be in the cold and rain, and they wouldn't be starving. But what that did, I get back to my unit with these 8 German soldiers, and I got a Bronze Star. Said I always felt like I didn't deserve it. But I read what really happened. He might have felt for a second like the thing for me to do is to just surrender. But he held strong. That's why they surrendered. Because they really didn't want to fight anymore anyway. But what he thought was his moment of weakness, I almost just gave up. Was it? He had a split second that he thought about dropping his weapon, but he didn't. He gripped it a little tighter, and they all dropped their weapons. One little 4'8", 4'9", this little bitty short man, but he was one of the tallest men I've ever known. He's passed away for a while now. But his memory and the memory of those men at that campground that would twice a year get together and make their stone soup, because even in the ravages of war, they came together to do something as a community, and that never left them. Now, the reason I think this is important is because the country seems like we're all at odds. I think what we need to do is stop fighting and sit down and make a kettle of stone soup. I know, it sounds kind of crazy. The crazier things have worked out. I've been trying to think of what to do for a video for my channel. Last night I was preparing one, and then I got called to dinner. And it was the leftover soup we not finished off today is what dinner was. Halfway through dinner, my lifelong condition, I've only had it for a little over a year, but the doctor was almost gleeful when he told me, you now have a condition. I was at the emergency room about a year ago, and colitis, something like that they call it. It feels deadly when it's happening. And last night, deep into the night, I had another episode. And when that happens, it takes it all out of me. But I wasn't alone. As I was in the bathroom going through all this, my wife was right there with me. She took care of me. As I ended up on the floor in pain, she brought me a pillow. Well, first she got a towel and put down so I wouldn't be laying on the floor. I didn't care at the time. When I have one of these episodes, I end up blacking out. And so when I feel it coming on, I try to get to the floor. And she knew that. This is the 4th episode I've had since I've been diagnosed with it. And she got me a pillow. There's really nothing I can do except ride it out. And so ride it out we did. I'm on the floor. Everything goes dark just for a second. But I never felt alone. I had my wife. And quite honestly, I had my Savior with me. I try not to talk about politics and religion on this channel because it upsets too many people. But sometimes in a man's life, he just has to admit that I'm not in control. I'm sure many of you out there have had moments like that when you realize and acknowledge that you're not in control. The reality is none of us really are. We rely on our bodies to work and function, and when they don't, we go to a building where these people that practice, none of them have it figured out. They're all practicing medicine. So we do the best we can. But when you're the one that's on the floor and you feel that blackout coming, there's no better feeling than seeing your spouse there. It's just, it's the way it is. And what was funny last night, I was thinking about the soup, and then I thought about stone soup. You see, those men, they had nothing to hold them together. They're probably the worst place a man can be. And yet they came together to take what was a very distasteful meal and turn it into something that not just was edible, but it tasted delicious. So much so that about 6 months after this one picnic, we had another picnic. I was president of the picnic club in town. And after the picnic, 8 or 10 of us would stick around and clean up and get everything situated. Well, we always held back some pork. We would roast a hog, and man, it was at a good picnic. We would always hold back some of the pork, some steaks, and my father-in-law made bean soup. It was his specialty. He had a huge kettle. I don't even know how many beans he had in it. I did it one time, but I forgot. And it was known countywide. Everybody knew about Corky's bean soup. And we had some of that soup. And we sit down to eat, and I look over, I say, Corky, we have steaks. Why are you eating the bean soup? He said, because For me, this is the most comfort food I've ever had. It brought nothing but good memories for him. He didn't remember the war. He remembered the community that came together to make stone soup. He remembered the closeness of his friends. And he remembered the humanity at a time when everyone thought they had lost it. Now, I don't know what all this means. To me, it just means that at a time when I was feeling like death could be moments away, and for me, when I get this, an episode pops up, it tends to feel that way. Even though I've been through it a few times, you still, in the back of your mind, you wonder. The doctor said there's only 1% that this could be fatal to. And then he said, you need to go buy a lottery ticket because you're in that 1%. You know, everything in life has been hard for me. And I'm not trying to turn this into feel sorry for Grandpa Chuck. That's not it at all. I've just always had to work for what I have. I never had anybody come up and say, you know what, I like your work. Come up here and say, well, actually, I have had that happen. I've had a few employers that saw me working for someone else and came up and offered me more money to go work for them. So I guess I have had that. But I worked for that. I worked hard for that. So nothing ever comes free. And I got off on a tangent. I'm sorry. I don't know why. But when those men in my father-in-law's unit got together to cook up some stone soup, even their commanders would come down for a bowl. It was that good. And Corky would rather choose the bean soup that he had made over steaks. And I mean, they were nice steaks. And Corky loved steak. But he loved the bean soup more. I guess now that I'm 70, I guess maybe some of it made him feel like he was 22 again and surrounded by friends, people he could trust. And that was comfort. You know, the reality is we all have that same desire to be surrounded by those that love us and food that enriches our lives. So that's what Grandpa Chuck wanted to come in and talk about, stone soup, and how sometimes the coming together of many can create something beautiful. I kind of think that's what YouTube is to me sometimes. I have made so many friends that I never would have been in contact with, and they all are so encouraging. If you've had a pleasant experience, hit that like and share button down below, please. And please leave me a comment. The comments are like gold to me. Well, maybe not gold, but close. I'll see you in the next one, folks. Bye.